Welcome everybody to Govardhana Hill at the Bhaktivedanta Ashram, ISKCON. We're reading from the Sri Caitanya Charitamrita, and we've been making progress to the first book of the Madhya Lila, which includes chapters 1 through 6. Today we're taking up where we left off yesterday at Madhya 6, 145, which is the liberation of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And first off, on a respectful basis, to His Divine Grace, HG Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who has given us this edition, and to all the assembled devotees. Vanchakalpadabhrisha, Kripasindubhesha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead wished to become many, he glanced over the material energy. Before the creation, there were no mundane eyes or mind. Therefore, the transcendental nature of the Absolute Truth's mind and eyes is confirmed. In the Chandogya Upanishad 6.2.3, it is said, Tat aikshita bahu shyam rajayeya. This statement confirms the fact that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead wishes to become many, the cosmic manifestation arises simply by his glancing over material energy. It may be noted that the Supreme Lord glanced over the material nature before the creation of this cosmic manifestation. Before the creation, there were no material minds or material eyes. Therefore, the mind by which the Supreme Personality of God desired to create is transcendental. And the eyes with which he glanced over material nature are also transcendental. Thus, the Lord's mind, eyes, and other senses are all transcendental. What?
Which verse?
Do we need what?
The verse.
46. 145 and 146. That's 6, 145 and 46, and we're on 147 now. Brahma Shabde Kahe Purna Swayam Bhagavan Krishna Shastrir Praman. The word Brahman indicates the complete Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Sri Krishna. That is the verdict of all Vedic literatures. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, where the Lord says, Vedaisha Sarvera Hameva Vedya. The ultimate object in all Vedic literature is Krishna. Everyone is searching for him. This is also confirmed elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavatmam prapadyate vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. When one has actually become wise through the study of Vedic literature, he surrenders unto Vasudeva, Bhagavan, Sri Krishna. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2, 7-8. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janaya Yashuvairagyam Yanam Chayana Haitukam Dharma Swanustita Pumsam Vishwaksena Katasuya Notpadaya Yadiratim Shrama Evihi Kevalam. Understanding Vasudeva is real knowledge. By engaging in devotional service of Vasudeva Krishna, one acquires perfect knowledge and Vedic understanding. Thus one becomes detached from the material world. This is the perfection of human life. Although one may perfectly follow religious rituals and ceremonies, he is simply wasting his time, Shrama Evahi Kevalam, if he does not attain this perfection. Before the creation of the cosmic manifestation, the Supreme Personality of God had possessed his totally transcendental mind and eyes. That Supreme Personality of God is Krishna. A person may think that there is no direct statement about Krishna in the Upanishads, But the fact is that the Vedic mantras cannot be understood by people with mundane senses. As stated in the Padma Purana, Atashi Krishna Namadi Nabhavet Grayam Indriya, a person with mundane senses cannot fully understand the name, qualities, form, and pastimes of Sri Krishna. The Puranas are therefore meant to explain and supplement Vedic knowledge. The great sages present the Puranas in order to make the Vedic mantras understandable for common men. Sri Shudra Dvija Bandhunam. Considering that women, Shudras, and Dvija Bandhus, unworthy sons of the twice-born, cannot understand the Vedic hymns directly, Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata. Actually, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Vedeshu Durlabham, untraceable in the Vedas. But when the Vedas are properly understood, or when Vedic knowledge is received from devotees, one can understand that all Vedic knowledge leads to Sri Krishna. The Brahma Sutra 1.1.3 confirms this fact also. Shastra Yoni Dvat. Commenting upon this Brahma Sutra aphorism, Sri Madhvacharya says, the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, Mahabharata, Pancharatra, and the original Valmiki Ramayana are all Vedic literatures. Any literature following the conclusive statements of these Vedic literatures is also to be considered Vedic literature. That literature which does not conform to Vedic literature is simply misleading. Therefore, when reading Vedic literature, we must take the path traversed by great acharyas, Mahajano Yena Gata Sapanta. Unless one follows the path traversed by great acharyas, he cannot understand the real purport of the Vedas. The confidential meaning of the Vedas is not easily understood by common men. Therefore, that meaning is supplemented by the words of the Puranas. Ahobhagyam Nandagopa Vrjaukasam Yan Mitram Paramanandam Purnam Brahma Sanatanam. This is from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 14th chapter, spoken by Brahma. He says, how greatly fortunate are Nanda Maharaj, the cowherd men, and all the inhabitants of Brajabhumi. There's no limit to their fortune because the absolute truth, the source of transcendental bliss, the eternal supreme person, the supreme Brahman, has become their friend. The Vedic Apanipad mantra rejects material hands and legs, yet it states that the Lord goes very fast and accepts everything offered to him. All these mantras confirm that the absolute truth is personal, but the Mayavadis, throwing away the direct meaning, interpret the absolute truth as impersonal. Purport: as mentioned above, the Shvetashvatara Upanishad states, Apanipado jivano grihita pashyatya chakshu sashvinotya karna saveti vedyam nachatas yasti veta tam ayur aryam purusham mahantam. This Vedic mantra clearly states Purusham Mahantam. The word Purusha means person. In the Bhagavad Gita 10:12, Arjuna confirms that this person is Krishna when he addresses Krishna as Purusham Shashvatam. You are the original person. Thus, the Purusham Mahantam mentioned in the verse from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad is Sri Krishna. His hands and legs are not mundane, but are completely transcendental. However, when he comes, fools take him to be an ordinary person, Avajananti Mam Buddha Manusham Tanamashritam. One who has no Vedic knowledge, who has not studied the Vedas from a bona fide spiritual master, does not know Krishna. Therefore, he is Mudha. Such fools take Krishna to be an ordinary person, Param Bhavam Ajanata. They do not actually know what Krishna is. Manushanam Sahasreshu Kashyad Yatiti Siddhaye. It is not possible to understand Krishna simply by studying the Vedas perfectly One must have the mercy of a devotee, yat pada. One who is not favored by a devotee cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Arjuna confirms this in the Bhagavad Gita, 10:14. My Lord, it is very difficult to understand your personality. The less intelligent class of men cannot understand the Supreme Lord without being favored by his devotee. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita 4:34 contains another injunction. Tadvidi paripratena pariprashnena sevaya upadakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master and surrender to him. Only then can one understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a person. (152) Are you describing as formless that Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose transcendental form is complete with 6 transcendental opulences? Sarvabhauma's question to Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Whoever is asking the questions directs the conversation. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead is formless, how can he be said to walk very fast and accept everything offered to him? Rejecting the direct meaning of the Vedic mantras, the Mayavadi philosophers interpret them and try to establish the absolute truth as formless. Actually, the Supreme Truth has an eternal personal form full of opulence. The Mayavadi philosophers try to interpret the absolute truth as being without potency. However, in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.8, it is clearly said, Parasya Shaktir Vivadaiva Shrite. The absolute truth has multi-potencies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has 3 primary potencies. Are you trying to prove that he has no potencies? Purport: Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu now quotes 4 verses from the Vishnu Purana, 6.7.61 through 63 and 1.12.69. Keep that in mind, it's going to be on the quiz. To explain the different potencies of the Lord. Here we go. Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta Kshetra Gyakya Tata Para Avidyakarma Sangyanya Tritiya Shaktir Ishyate. The internal potency of the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, is spiritual, as verified by the Shastras. There is another spiritual potency known as Kshetragya, or the living entity. The third potency, which is known as nescience, makes the living entity godless and fills him with fruitive activity. Purport: in the Bhagavad Gita and Sri Krishna's discourse on the Kshetra and the Kshetragya, it is clearly stated that the Kshetragya is the living entity who knows his field of activities. The living entities in the material world are forgetful of their eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This forgetfulness is called avidya, or nescience. What's it called? Avidya. It's a serious affliction. In fact, when I used to work at the San Francisco airport, and I'd give people a book, I said, and we're collecting donations because we're on a campaign to stamp out one of the worst diseases in the world. And they go, what is it? And I said, it's avidya. It means ignorance. And they go, oh, we'd like to help with that. This forgetfulness is called avidya, or nescience. The avidya shakti, the avidya potency of the material world, provokes fruitive activity. It provokes it. Although this avidya shakti, material energy or nescience, is also an energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is especially intended to keep the living entities in a state of forgetfulness. This is due to their rebellious attitude toward the Lord. Thus, although the living entities are constitutionally spiritual, they come under the influence of the potency of nescience. How this happens is described in the following verse. Yaya Kshetragya Shakti Sa Veshtita Nripa Sarvaga Samsara Tapan Akilan Avapnotyatra Santatan. O king, the Kshetragya Shakti is a living entity. Although he has the facility to live in either the material or spiritual world, he suffers the threefold miseries of material existence because he is influenced by the avidya, nescience, potency, which covers his constitutional position. 156. Taya tirohita trachcha shakti kshetragya samgita sarva bhuteshu bhupala tarantam yena vartate. This living entity, covered by the influence of nescience, exists in different forms in the material condition. O king, he is thus proportionately freed from the influence of material energy to a greater or lesser degree. Purport: the material energy acts on the living entity in different degrees according to how he acquires the association of the three modes of material nature. There are 8,400,000 species of life, some inferior, some superior, and some mediocre. The gradations of the bodies are calculated according to the covering of material energy. In the lower categories, including aquatics, trees, plants, insects, birds, and so forth, spiritual consciousness is almost non-existent. In the mediocre category, the human form of life, just so you know, spiritual consciousness is comparatively awakened. In the superior life forms, spiritual consciousness is fully awakened. Then the living entity understands his real position and tries to escape the influence of material energy by developing Krishna consciousness. Why live a mediocre life when you can have it all by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra? Are you ready for the fourth verse?
Yes.
These are really important verses spoken from the lotus mouth of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, at a very important point in the conversation. Worth learning all these. Ladini sandini sambit trayeka sarva sangshaye lada tapakari mishra twai no gunavarjite. The Supreme Personality of God is Satchidananda Vigraha. This means that he originally has three potencies: the pleasure potency, the potency of eternality, and the potency of knowledge. Together, these are called the Chit potency, and they are present in full in the Supreme Lord. For the living entities who are part and parcel of the Lord, the pleasure potency in the material world is sometimes displeasing and sometimes mixed. This is not the case with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he is not under the influence of the material energy or its modes. See, all you can get is either mixed happiness or misery. Which would you choose? Mixed happiness is almost worse. Flat out suffering means that, okay, it's bad, now we can pray. The Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original form is full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. The spiritual potency in these three positions, Sat, Chit, and Ananda, assumes three different forms. Purport: according to the verdict of the Vedic literature, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity, and the illusory energy, this material world, constitute the subject matter of knowledge. Everyone should try to understand the relationships between them. First of all, one should try to understand the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. From the Shastras, we understand that the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the sum total of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. As stated in the verse 154, Vishnu Shakti Puraprokta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all potencies, and his potencies are all spiritual. The three portions of the spiritual potency are called Ladini, the bliss portion, Sandini, the eternity portion, and Sambit, the knowledge portion. We accept knowledge of these as full knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: to acquire knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one must take shelter of the Sambit potency of the Supreme Lord. 160. The spiritual potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead also appears in three phases: internal, marginal, and external. These are all engaged in his devotional service in love. The spiritual potency of the Lord is manifested in three phases: the internal or spiritual potency, the marginal potency which consists of the living entities, and the external potency known as Maya Shakti. We must understand that in each of these three phases, the original spiritual potencies of pleasure, eternity, and knowledge remain intact. When the potencies of spiritual pleasure and knowledge are both bestowed upon the conditioned souls, the conditioned soul can escape the clutches of the external potency, Maya, which acts as a cover, obscuring one's spiritual identity. When freed, the living entity awakens to Krishna consciousness and engages in devotional service with love and affection. Spiritual pleasure and knowledge. Lanini Samvit come together. 161. In his spiritual potency, the Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kinds of opulences. You do not accept this spiritual potency, and this is due to your great impotence. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is full of 6 opulences. All of these potencies are on the transcendental platform. To understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as impersonal and devoid of potency is to go completely against Vedic information. What's the Bengali word for impudence? What is the definition of impudence?
Great. Sahasa means last word. Impudence. Sahasa.
Sahasa means impudence.
Mm-hmm.
The word itself in English means a boldness or rudeness in behavior or speech that shows a lack of respect for others. It is often used to describe actions or words that are shamelessly disrespectful, insolent, or audacious in an inappropriate way. What is the etymology of the word, please?
In Adi, this word is translated as...
It derives from... I'm sorry?
You're saying that Sahasa in Adi is energy.
Sahasa means energy. Also. The word impudence comes from Latin impudentia, meaning shameless, rude, or insolent. That in turn comes to impudens, which means without shame. The prefix in, not, pudens, pudere, to feel shame. It means that it feels no shame, not feeling shame, impudence, shamelessly doing things. It entered Middle English via Old French impudence in the late Middle Ages, retaining the sense of shameless disrespect or insolence. It's a pretty heavy word, to be impudent. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is full with 6 opulences. All of these potencies are on the transcendental platform. To understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as impersonal and devoid of potency is to go completely against Vedic information. 162. The Lord is the master of the potencies, and the living entity is the servant of them. That is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. However, you declare that the Lord and the living entities are one and the same. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature the master of all potencies. By nature, the living entities, being infinitesimal, are always under the influence of the Lord's potencies. According to the Mundaka Upanishad, Dvasuparna Sayuja Sakaya Samanam Vriksham Parishash Vajate Tayor Anya Pipalam Swade Ata Anashan Anyo Vichaksha Shiti Samani Vrikshe Purusho Nimagno Ishaya Shati Maya Muyamana Jushtam Yada Pashyat Dayanam Jushtam Yada Pashyat Yam Isham Asya Mahimanam Eti Vitashoka. The Mundaka Upanishad completely distinguishes the Lord from the living entities. The living entity is subjected to the reactions of fruit of activity, whereas the Lord simply witnesses such activity and bestows the results. According to the living entity's desires, he is wandering from one body to another and from one planet to another under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma. However, when the living entity comes to his senses by the mercy of the Lord, he is awarded devotional service. Thus he is saved from the clutches of Maya. At such a time he can see his eternal friend, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and become free from all lamentation and hankering. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 1854, where the Lord says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanadma Nashochatina Kankshati. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. Thus, it is definitely proved that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master of all potencies, and that the living entities are always subjected to these potencies. That is the difference between Mayadhish and Mayavash. In the Bhagavad Gita, the living entity is established as the marginal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet you say that the living entity is completely different from the Lord. Purport: the Brahma Sutra states that according to the principle of Shakti Shaktimator Abheda, the living entity is simultaneously one with and different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Qualitatively, the living entity and the Supreme Lord are one, but in quantity they are different. According to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy, Achintya Abhed Tattva, the living entity and the Supreme Lord are accepted as one and different at the same time. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego are my eightfold separated energies. Besides these inferior energies, which are material, there is another energy, a spiritual energy, and this is the living being, Almighty Armed One. The entire material world is sustained by the living entities. Verses 164 and 165 are quotations from Bhagavad Gita 7, 4, and 5. The transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is complete in eternity, cognizance, and bliss. However, you describe this transcendental form as a product of material goodness. One who does not accept the transcendental form of the Lord is certainly an agnostic. Such a person should be neither seen nor touched. Indeed, he is subject to being punished by Yamaraj. Purport: according to the Vedic instructions, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has his eternal transcendental form, which is always blissful and full of knowledge. Impersonalists think that material refers to the forms within our experience, and that spiritual refers to an absence of form. However, one should know that beyond this material nature is another nature which is spiritual. Just as there are material forms in this material world, there are spiritual forms in the spiritual world. This is confirmed by all Vedic literature. The spiritual forms in the transcendental world have nothing to do with the negative conception of formlessness. The conclusion is that a person is an agnostic when he does not agree to worship the transcendental form of the Lord. Actually, at the present moment, all systems of religion deny the worship of the form of the Lord due to ignorance of his transcendental form. The first-class materialists, the Mayavadis, imagine 5 specific forms of the Lord. But when they try to equate the worship of such imaginary forms with bhakti, they are immediately condemned. Lord Sri Krishna confirms this in Bhagavad Gita 7:15, where he says, Na mam duskritina muda prapadyante naradama. Bereft of real knowledge due to agnosticism, the Mayavadi philosophers should not even be seen by the devotees of the Lord nor touched, because these philosophers are liable to be punished by Yamaraj, the superintendent demigod who judges the activities of sinful men. The Mayavadi agnostics wander within this universe in different species of life due to their non-devotional activities. Such living entities are subjected to the punishments of Yamaraj. Only the devotees who are always engaged in the service of the Lord are exempt from the jurisdiction of Yamaraj. We'll take a few comments or reflections, and if anybody used a popcorn maker or something and blew out the fuse, please turn it off. Yes, Mukharvind.
I was just appreciating the knowledge that is coming through Prabhupada books. If we just trace the knowledge when we were started reading this Chaitanya Charitamrita, that how this section of Chaitanya Charitamrita was given by Swarup Damodar to Raghunath Das Goswami, and through Raghunath Das Goswami it came through Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. They are all in their different ecstasies, but then they are still saying this, the foundational truth. And the whole dialogues between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if you see, is such a great treat to hear the details, and that's what even Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami in the beginning says, Siddhanta Chitta Prole Na Karyala Siha Sudhrina Manas, that we should not be lazy to understand the conclusive truth of the scriptures. If you're not doing that, that's not the highest, that's not the good thing. So I was remembering and how it's very fortunate to get this knowledge, the highest knowledge, and also appreciating the Bhagavad Gita. There's so many Bhagavad Gita quotes, and even Prabhupada's bring few days back you were saying that how sometimes people just they think Bhagavad Gita is only for the neophyte, but here we can see how Prabhupada is again and again bringing, or even Direct Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami quotes directly from Bhagavad Gita, many verses.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is quoting, because he's the one speaking. Who's to say he didn't say them directly? I mean, that's how we can interpret it. And I always find in resonance with your points that when I see the verses that Lord Caitanya quoted from the Bhagavad Gita, whenever I quote them, I think, Lord Caitanya quoted these, so they have a special place. Okay, anything else from outside? Everyone okay out there? Oh, they're frozen, that's why everyone looks so still. Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. In verse 159, where it explains the three portions of the spiritual potency are called Ladini, Samdini, and Samvit. I was remembering how Srimati Radharani, she's in charge of the Ladini potency, but I can't remember the other two. Is there a personality? And I'm sure there is, because there's a personality behind all of them. Can you remind me of the
Balaram is Sandini.
And Samvit?
And Samvit.
That's the one.
That's the one we're lacking.
Yes. Lacking totally. Personally.
We'll come back to you on that.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Go ahead. Chaitanya Prabhu.
It's interesting how Srila Prabhupada explains how the Vedic literatures are all glorifying Krishna. In fact, Madhya says everything is a glorification of Krishna. So this is a claim which the academic scholars cannot get it. But then he explains it very nicely here, that only those who are purified can see it like that. And in fact, I was told by one of our scholars that you know that how in Sanskrit it's not like sentence how we write in English, it's just one paragraph full of many things and they have to break it down. So he was even explaining to me that Madhvacharya was so strong that he doesn't break it as Tattvamasi, he breaks it as Atattvamasi. So I mean, he was very strong in his defense of the personal philosophy of Krishna consciousness.
My goodness. Okay, one more from outside, one more from inside. Here we go.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
This is from online audience. We have 17 devotees watching online.
They were anyway. Okay.
And we have one comment from one of the devotees, Madhya Das Brahmachari. He says, "So nectar."
Wow, that brahmachari is absorbed. Nice.
And we have some names who are watching, if you'd like to know.
Yes.
We have Chitralekha Sakhi Dasi.
Haribol.
Caitanya Nimai Namadas,
Haribol.
Anu Shadeja,
Haribol.
Noel Craver,
Haribol.
and Madhya Das Brahmachari.
Jai. Thank you for the report. Makes us feel interconnected with everybody in the world. Okay, last one.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, I have read in Prabhupada's books that the impersonalists, they usually go and merge with the Brahma Jyoti. But here there's a serious thing written that the Mayavadis who don't believe in the form of the Lord, they actually come in different species of life. But in other places it's also mentioned that they go and merge and then they are born in some auspicious families and they again restart their journey of understanding.
Well, addressing the last one,
Yes.
Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita that somebody who's pursued the path of yoga or devotional service has an opportunity in the next life to take it up again. He doesn't specifically say Mayavadis or impersonalists. And regarding those who merge into the impersonal Brahman, that requires some bhakti. You can't merge into the impersonal Brahman, which is Krishna's amorphous energy, without some bhakti. In fact, Prabhupada quotes several times throughout his books a point that Shankaracharya makes about how the impersonalist establishes a deity and then meditates on the deity in order to come to the point of being qualified to merge. But those who are utterly offensive, and it's a matter of attitude and the degree of it, are put into a kind of merged situation in the lower species of life. And it's not out of spite, but it's out of kind of compassion. Prabhupada explains the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, the only verse in the Bhagavad Gita that sounds a little severe, that people could point to and say, aha, you're just like the Christians. Where Krishna says that I cast them down into lower species of life. Prabhupada unpacks that and says, those who are misbehaving or have an errant mentality, when they're put into the lower species of life, then they're saved, they're put on hold from the offenses that they're making. And then when they gradually come back up again, they can start afresh. They burn off some of the karma also in that position, so that they can come to their senses and start again. So it's Krishna's mercy. But Sri Upanishad also mentions that those who worship the impersonal absolute enter the darkest region of ignorance. So Mahendra Prabhu made the point yesterday about there are nuances in those who approach the impersonal aspect of the Lord. And the very offensive ones are ones who very specifically blaspheme the Lord by saying that he has a material body, that he's not the ultimate, not the ultimate, but he's actually material. There is no Krishna and so forth. And that's something Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brings up when he talks to Murari Gupta, and that it pains him that Mayavadis will say that he has no hands, he has no legs, he has no face, and so forth. So that's a kind of offensive mentality that drags one downward. You're welcome. So we're continuing just after Akshobhya. Okay, we have two last points. Probably not last, they're probably interim.
Yes, probably. Yes, I wanted to ask. So avidya covers the living entity. How to understand? Yes, was reading that the impersonalist, he cannot really merge the Brahmayoti without bhakti. So it is like a fact, it's like that, or
Is that a fact?
or only it is in some
No process,
cases.
as is mentioned in the Chaitanya Shriner, no process, including the personal path, that can be successful without some bhakti. There has to be at least an element of it, otherwise it won't be successful. It can't be successful. Yes, that's a fact.
Guru, just linking the younger Brahmana, the Sakshi Gopal episode with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's moon. He's trying to put his Sarvabhauma is a logician, and so he's understood his mood that Sarvabhauma needs to be addressed with logic and references. So that was something that I wanted to highlight, and his idea was to uplift Sarvabhauma because that's what nourishes him. Shastra nourishes him, so he's saying, okay, let's work with where the person is attached instead of getting offended. So that was the quality of the younger Brahmana also, which helped remove avidya of not just the older Brahmana, his son, and everyone else who witnessed it. So that was really unique. And the idea
what would you
was,
define as the way in which the younger Brahmana, what technique did he use? If Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu's Shastra, the Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and making the parallel, what is it, what element do you see he used?
but he was trying to address that this is something which will good for you. Like if you cross this hurdle of avidya in your confusion of how to behave under the influence of your atheistic son, your progress is inhibited. So he was more like a teacher to the older Brahmana, so that he could progress.
Yeah, he didn't become overly emotional. He presented it in a way that would entice the piety in the Brahmana to take the right path.
Yeah, he also mentioned that it's not for his own lusty desires or his getting married.
Yeah.
It's not.
Thank you. Nice parallel. Okay, so we're taking up, I still can't see him, maybe it needs to be on. We're taking up at the text 168. The Buddhists do not recognize the authority of the Vedas. Therefore, they are considered agnostics. However, those who have taken shelter of the Vedic scriptures yet preach agnosticism in accordance with the Mayavad philosophy are certainly more dangerous than the Buddhists. Purport: although the Buddhists are directly opposed to Vaishnava philosophy, it can easily be understood that the Shankarites are more dangerous because they accept the authority of the Vedas, yet act contrary to Vedic instruction. Vedashraya Nastikyavada means agnosticism under the shelter of Vedic culture, and refers to the monistic philosophy of the Mayavadis. Lord Buddha abandoned the authority of the Vedic literature and therefore rejected the ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices recommended in the Vedas. His nirvana philosophy means stopping all material activities. Lord Buddha did not recognize the presence of transcendental forms and spiritual activities beyond the material world. He simply described voidism beyond this material existence. The Mayavadi philosophers offer lip service to Vedic authority but try to escape the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. They concoct some idea of a transcendental position and call themselves Narayan or God. However, God's position is completely different from their concoction. Such Mayavadi philosophers consider themselves above the influence of karmakanda, fruit of activities and their reactions. For them, the spiritual world is equated with the Buddhist voidism. There is very little difference between impersonalism and voidism. Voidism can be directly understood, but the impersonalism enunciated by Mayavadi philosophers is not very easily understandable. Of course, Mayavadi philosophers accept a spiritual existence, but they do not know about the spiritual world and spiritual beings. According to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.2.32, Yene Ravindakshavamukamaninas Vayasavavadavashuddha buddhaya Aruya Krishrena Paramparatata Patantito Narita Yushmanagraya. The intelligence of the Mayavadis is not purified. Therefore, even though they practice austerities for self-realization, they cannot remain within the impersonal Brahmajyoti. Consequently, they fall down again into this material world. The Mayavadi's conception of spiritual existence is almost identical to the negation of material existence. The Mayavadis believe that there is nothing positive in the spiritual world. As a result, they cannot understand devotional service or the worship of the Supreme Person, Satchit Ananda Vigraha. The Mayavadi philosophers consider deity worship in devotional service to be pratibimbavad, or the worship of a form that is the reflection of a false material form. Thus the Lord's transcendental form, which is eternally blissful and full of knowledge, is unknown to Mayavadi philosophers. Although the term Bhagavan is explicitly described in Srimad Bhagavatam, they cannot understand it. Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdite. The Absolute Truth is called Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The Mayavadis try to understand Brahman only, or, at the most, Paramatma. However, they are unable to understand Bhagavan. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna says, Maya Pritagyana. Because of the temperament of the Mayavadi philosophers, real knowledge is taken from them. Because they cannot receive the mercy of the Lord, they will always be bewildered by his transcendental form. Impersonal philosophy destroys the three phases of knowledge, Gyan, Gyeya, and Gyata. As soon as one speaks of knowledge, there must be a person who is the knower, the knowledge itself and the object of knowledge. Mayavadi philosopher combines these three categories. Therefore, the Mayavadis cannot understand how the spiritual potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead act. Because of their poor fund of knowledge, they cannot understand the distinction in the spiritual world between knowledge, the knower, and the object of knowledge. Because of this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considers the Mayavadi philosophers more dangerous than the Buddhists. There's a verse in the Sri Upanishad that describes this phenomena also. Who knows what the verse is? Do you know?
Sorry, I didn't hear the point.
There's a verse in the Sri Upanishad that describes how ignorance is bad, but so-called knowledge is worse. Yes, Mukaravind. You need the mic so the devotees all over the world can hear you.
Andam tamatra vishanti vidyayam upasati tato bhuya yate tamoya o vidyayam rata. So, and those who are worshipper of knowledge, they go to the darker region of existence, but worse than that is that those who follow the so-called knowledge. And the so-called knowledge refers to the...
It's a perfect fit for this purport, because Prabhupada says the Buddhists are in ignorance of the Atma and the Paramatma. But then the Mayavadis claim that they're portraying the truth of the Vedas, but then they obscure them, the real meaning, and say that there is no Supreme Personality of Godhead, but to speak of a soul. So it's misleading. So-called knowledge is worse than ignorance. That's brilliant, isn't it? In the Sri Upanishad. Probably gives the example there of you approach a snake, or the snake approaches you, and you become enamored of the diamond-like pattern on the hood of the snake, then you may be bitten and die. So if you become enamored of so-called knowledge, thinking that it's going to help you, then you also die spiritually. Text 169. This is frozen again, but I guess that's going to happen every time the electricity goes out. Srila Vyasadeva presented the Vedanta philosophy for the deliverance of conditioned souls. But if one hears the commentary of Shankaracharya, everything is spoiled. Factually, the devotional service of the Lord is described in the Vedanta Sutra, but the Mayavadi philosophers, the Shankarites, prepared a commentary known as the Sharirak Bhasha, in which the transcendental form of the Lord is denied. The Mayavadi philosophers think that the living entity is identical with the Supreme Soul, Brahman. Their commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra are completely opposed to the principle of devotional service. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore warns us to avoid these commentaries. If one indulges in hearing the Shankarite Sharirak Bhasha, he will certainly be bereft of all real knowledge. The ambitious Mayavadi philosophers desire to merge into the existence of the Lord, and this may be accepted as Sayuja Mukti. However, this form of mukti means denying one's individual existence. In other words, it is a kind of spiritual suicide. This is absolutely opposed to the philosophy of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga offers immortality to the individual conditioned soul. If one follows the Mayavadi philosophy, he misses his opportunity to become immortal after giving up the material body. The immortality of the individual person is the highest perfection or stage of a living entity can attain. The Vedanta Sutra aims at establishing that the cosmic manifestation has come into being by the transformation of the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And for a further explanation of Parinamavad, you can refer to the Adi Lila 7th chapter, and the verses are listed there, 121 through 133. Text 171, the touchstone after touching iron produces volumes of gold without being changed. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests himself as a cosmic manifestation by his inconceivable potency, yet he remains unchanged in his eternal transcendental form. Purport, according to the commentary of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the purpose of the Janmadhyasa verse in the Vedanta Sutra is to establish that the cosmic manifestation is the result of the transformation of the potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord is the master of innumerable eternal energies, which are unlimited. Sometimes these energies are manifested and sometimes they are not. In any case, all energies are under his control. Therefore, he is the original energetic, the abode of all energies. A common brain in the conditioned state cannot conceive of how these inconceivable energies abide in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how he exists in his innumerable forms as the master of both spiritual and material energies, how he is the master of both manifest and potential powers, and how contradictory potencies can abide in him. As long as the living entity is within this material world in the condition of illusion, he cannot understand the activities of the inconceivable energies of the Lord. Thus, the Lord's energies, though factual, are simply beyond the power of the common brain to understand. When the atheistic philosophers or the Mayavadis, being unable to understand the inconceivable energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, imagine an impersonal void, their imagination is only the counterpart of materialistic thinking. Within the material world, there is nothing inconceivable. High-thinking philosophers and scientists can tackle the material energy, but not being able to understand the spiritual energy, they can simply imagine an inactive state, such as the impersonal Brahman. This is simply the negative side of material life. By such imperfect knowledge, the Mayavadi philosophers conclude that the cosmic manifestation is a transformation of the Supreme. Thus, they must necessarily also accept the theory of the illusion of the Supreme, Vivarta Vada. However, if we accept the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, we can understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead can appear within this material world without being touched or contaminated by the three modes of material nature. From the Shastras we learn that there is a stone or jewel called a touchstone that can transform iron into gold. Although the touchstone turns iron into gold many times, it remains in its original condition. If such a material stone can maintain its inconceivable energy after producing volumes of gold, certainly the Supreme Personality of Godhead can remain in his original Satchit Ananda form after creating the cosmic world. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.10, he acts only through his different energies. Mayadhyakshena Prakriti. Krishna directs the material energy, and that potency works in this material world. This is also confirmed in the Brahma Samhita 5.44. Shristi Stiti Palaya Sadhana Shaktireka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vivarti Durga Isharurupamapi Yasya Chacheshtate Sa Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. The Durga Shakti, material energy, acts under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the universal creation, maintenance, and destruction are being carried out by the Durga Shakti. Krishna's direction is in the background. The conclusion is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead remains as he is, even though directing his energy, which makes the diverse cosmic manifestation work so wonderfully. Let's take a break and we'll come back here at 9:15. Vajakalpadurvishya Kripasindhavesha Kitanam Bhavyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.